Hey guys! Tonight, welcome to the Tang Dynasty, where you'll be spending the next 24 hours as a Jianmin, legally base, socially expendable, spiritually unclean. Don't worry about your rights. You don't have any. Before you're forced to bow to a goat because it outranks you, go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe, and comment below which dynasty would you least like to die in and what time are you regretting this decision from. Buckle up. Your life is about to get short, hungry, and bureaucratically humiliating. Let's begin. You wake before sunrise because the rooster doesn't care that you collapsed only 4 hours ago, and neither does your landlord. Your eyes sting from the smoke of yesterday's fire that never fully died. If you're lucky, it smolders in the corner like a grudge. If not, it's out, and you're on your own to relight your life with damp twigs and whatever dignity you have left, which isn't much. The floor beneath you is dirt, packed hard by generations of bare feet and unfulfilled promises. You sleep beside your tools because no one trusts you not to steal, including you. Your blanket is a rag stitched from other, older rags, each one whispering tales of colder nights and worse diseases. The air tastes of mildew and livestock, a fragrant blend of pig breath and straw mold that clings to your skin like a second, less attractive epidermis. There is no pillow unless you count your own arm, and even that went numb sometime around midnight. Your house, no, your shelter, is a thatched roof embarrassment sanctioned by the village elders and forgotten by heaven. One room. No windows. A door that creaks not out of protest but exhaustion. You share this square of poverty with 3 generations of disappointment: your mother, who coughs blood but still grinds millet like she owes it a debt, your brother, whose leg never healed right after last autumn's conscription drill, and your niece, who is 6 and already knows how to avert her eyes when the tax collector passes. You are a Jianmin, the base caste, a social underclass designed to be invisible unless someone needs a scapegoat, a ditch dug, or a quota met. The Tang legal code classifies you just above animals and just below entertainers. You are not permitted to take the civil service exam, not allowed to marry outside your caste, and not expected to live long enough to become a problem. The sun is still a rumor on the horizon when you rise and step outside into a world that resents your breath. You tread carefully past the landlord's rice storehouse, don't look too long, or someone might accuse you of thinking about theft. That's a crime. Thinking. You pass a shrine dedicated to the earth god, bow out of instinct, not belief. Religion is less a comfort and more a performative insurance policy you can't afford to lapse. A missed bow could mean a missed meal, or worse, a whispered accusation. Superstition is the state's most effective surveillance network. You reach the communal well, already surrounded by other base souls dragging wooden buckets on frayed ropes. The water is muddy, shared with pigs, children, and whatever floated in overnight. You scoop your share and pretend not to notice the corpse of a frog bloating at the bottom. You'll boil it. Probably. Breakfast is a slurry of last week's millet gruel mixed with bin husks and salt if someone remembered to steal some. You chew it with teeth worn flat from grinding stone-shard bread and years of subservience. It tastes like obligation. There's no tea. That's for people with ancestors who owned land. You get warm water and the satisfaction of still being alive. Your job today is hauling bricks for a new granary that will never store your food. The project is imperial, which means no pay, but plenty of punishment. You wear the same tunic as yesterday, and the day before, and the month before that. It smells like fermented sweat and bureaucratic neglect. The overseer doesn't bother learning your name. He just calls you dog when he's pleased and corpse when he's not. You are not expected to speak, only to sweat. When the whip cracks, you bow deeper. When it lands, you thank it for noticing you. This is not hyperbole. This is law. You bleed quietly because complaining is considered theft of time. As the sun rises, you feel the heat claw its way down your spine. You are not allowed a hat. The gentry are allergic to the idea of shade for the undeserving. So your skin cracks, peels, burns. You become a parchment the state forgets to read. But you keep working, because resting would mean falling behind. And falling behind means punishment, and punishment is often indistinguishable from your normal Tuesday. You do not dream of escape. Only idiots and poets dream. You fantasize about rain, about a splinter that doesn't become infected, about A meal that doesn't smell like something died in it recently. You do not live. You persist. You are Jianmin, and the sun has only just risen. There is no toilet. There is no bathhouse. There is a trench behind the pigsty where your shame goes to die. You wait until just before dawn because that's the only time the overseer isn't watching, and even humiliation deserves a sliver of solitude. You carry a gourd with a hole in it and a bundle of grass tied with twine, today's toilet paper. The air is cold enough to make your bones ache, but not cold enough to kill the stench. Nothing kills the stench. It's older than your family line and more persistent than your debt. You squat behind a shriveled mulberry bush, knees popping like ancient joints reciting poetry. Around you, the world is quiet except for the pigs grunting nearby and your niece crying softly from a dream that probably wasn't a dream. The ground is slick, a mixture of last night's rain and last week's waste. You pray your sandals hold. They don't. Your foot slips, your hand finds purchase on something that squelches, and now you wear the morning like a curse. You finish quickly, as if that speeds up the indignity, and fumble with the grass. It's coarse, brittle, and mostly metaphorical. You wipe. It tears. You pretend it worked. You bury the evidence in dirt, pat it down like an apology, and hope no one steps there today. There are laws against defecating near shrines or roads, not for sanitation, but because the gods are picky and the magistrate enjoys corporal punishment. You once watched a man get flogged for relieving himself too close to a statue of Confucius. He bled irony and never walked straight again. There is a latrine near the temple, a stone hole surrounded by bamboo fencing, and the kind of gossip that gets people disappeared. It's technically public but practically exclusive. Only landowners use it, and only after spitting at you if they catch you nearby. You used it once. A merchant's son saw you and told his father. The next day, you got 3 lashes and a scar shaped like entitlement. You're lucky the merchant wasn't in a worse mood. The lowest caste isn't allowed to contaminate the dignity of shared spaces. Your presence is considered a threat to porcelain. So now you go behind the pigsty and thank the heavens for the pigs, because at least someone is willing to share their filth. Hygiene is not a word that exists in your vocabulary or anyone's. Bathing happens once a week if the weather allows, in a stream that doubles as a laundry tub and triples as a fish graveyard. You scrape your skin with rice chaff or sand, trying to dislodge the shame embedded in your pores. Soap? Luxury? Perfume? A myth. You once saw a noble woman bathed by servants, her skin scrubbed with citrus peel and camellia oil. She looked like a spirit. You looked like someone who'd scare one. You don't smell good. No one expects you to. Your odor is a warning label, a marker of caste and occupation. It precedes you like a curse and lingers like unpaid taxes. It clings to your clothes, your bedroll, your words. Even your silence has a scent. When you return to your hut, your mother pretends not to notice the mud. She hands you a damp rag. You wipe your hands and add the rag to the corner where cleanliness goes to rot. You try not to touch your niece. She's still young. She still hopes. You don't want to ruin that too soon. At sunrise, the tax collector's apprentice walks by, holding a lacquered scroll and a sneer. You bow. He sniffs. You are used to this exchange. It's the most interaction you get with someone who owns more than one set of teeth. You wonder what his latrine looks like. Probably has a lid. Maybe a view. You imagine it as a palace where the waste smells like incense and privilege. You imagine yourself there, not as a guest, of course, but as a cleaner. That's as high as you dare dream. By mid-morning, the sun bakes the trench behind the pigsty until it smells like fermented despair. Flies gather like officials, buzzing with bureaucratic indifference. Children play nearby, barefoot, laughing. One trips, falls, lands too close to where you were. His mother screams, drags him away, mutters about curses. She doesn't look at you. You clean your tools with canal water that bubbles with secrets. You think about diseases. Dysentery. Cholera. Worms that make your stomach feel like it's chewing back. You already have 2 of them, maybe 3. You forget which. The healer stopped naming them after your 3rd visit. Said your body was a marketplace. Everything was welcome. You still have to work today. Still have to carry bricks and not bleed too much. Still have to pretend your back isn't turning into a topographical map of untreated injuries. Still have to smile at your niece. Still have to pretend you're not infected, infested, or imploding. You do all this and still, someone will accuse you of laziness. Because they didn't see you squat behind a bush at dawn, holding your breath. And your dignity like both might slip through your fingers. They don't see it, but you carry it anyway. You carry it into the work yard, into the temple shadows, into every nod and bowed head. You are Jianmin. You live in the space between rules, where privacy is a punishment and filth is a form of protest. And the day has barely begun. You don't eat because you're hungry. You eat because it's expected of someone who hasn't died yet. Breakfast is less of a meal and more of a ritual sacrifice performed in honor of your remaining strength. It begins with a clay bowl, cracked and darkened from years of boiling despair, into which you pour a thin, sour millet gruel that barely remembers what a grain looked like. The millet came from the communal storehouse where surplus is a concept reserved for the literate. Your share is what was swept from the floor, the parts the rats didn't find interesting. It's been soaking overnight to soften the bitterness, but no amount of soaking removes the aftertaste of futility. The firewood used to boil it was stolen from a construction pile and replaced with a prayer that no one notices. The water is from a ditch that meanders between the bathhouse and the tannery. You strain it through a piece of cloth that used to be part of a funeral robe. You tell yourself it's been washed. You know it hasn't. The result is a bowl of something warm. Enough to remind you you're alive and bland enough to make you question why. It smells vaguely like wet burlap and tastes like someone tried to describe rice to a ghost. You eat it squatting outside your hut, because sitting would imply comfort and tables imply ownership. A dog eyes you from the alley, not with malice, but with envy. You consider sharing but remember the last time. The dog got diarrhea and you got a beating for wasting food on something that doesn't pay taxes. You eat quickly, not because you're in a hurry, but because the longer you taste it, the more likely you are to cry. Crying is frowned upon in public, not for reasons of pride, but because it attracts attention, and attention is the first symptom of trouble. You chew without chewing, swallowing lumps whole, letting them lodge in your throat like misplaced regret. The gruel doesn't fill you. It occupies space until something better arrives, which it won't. You might find a scallion. Later, you might steal a rotted pear from the roadside. You might die. All are equally likely. You once dreamed of eggs, not in a metaphorical sense, but literally. You dreamed of holding one, whole and uncracked, still warm from the hen, like the gods had handed you a promise. You woke up and ate your own fingernail by accident, mistaking it for a rice husk. That was 3 years ago. You still remember the taste. Sometimes there's salt. Not often. Salt is taxed, stored, regulated, and hoarded like it's the blood of the empire. You once traded a week's labor for a spoonful. You didn't regret it until the salt ran out and your employer suddenly couldn't remember your name or the agreement. He called it a misunderstanding. You called it Tuesday. If you're lucky, someone nearby is boiling turnip tops and the smell mixes with your gruel, making it almost palatable in a second-hand kind of way. You inhale it deeply, pretending it's yours. You close your eyes and let the aroma rewrite your reality for a moment. You smile. You hate yourself for smiling. A neighbor passes by, carrying a bundle of morning glories and a face like boiled shoe leather. He doesn't speak. You don't speak. Speaking implies familiarity, and caste boundaries are maintained more rigidly than city walls. He is a good person, a Liangmin. He is allowed to own land. You are allowed to dig through it for worms. He looks at your bowl, at your posture, at your silence, and he walks faster. You finish eating, if that's the right word. The bottom of the bowl is lined with silt and small stones. You scrape it with your teeth, carefully, slowly, because there's no money for a dentist and no faith in the village healer, who believes bad breath is caused by ghosts and toothaches by betrayal. You don't argue. Last time someone did, he was found near the latrine with incense stuffed in his mouth and a warning carved into his thigh. The bowl is licked clean, not from etiquette, but because any waste is a punishable offense. You place it upside down on the mat beside the door, where it will dry, crack further, and become slightly less useful tomorrow. A chicken clucks nearby. It belongs to your landlord. You briefly consider what it would take to steal it. A plan begins to form. Then you remember the last thief. They nailed his hand to the village wall. As an example, you decide to admire the chicken instead. From a distance, you stand, bones creaking like old hinges, stomach filled with something that dares to call itself breakfast. The sun is climbing, and so must you, up the trail to the work site, up the hierarchy that spits on you, up the ladder with no rungs. Your breath stinks. Your stomach growls. You are Jianmin. And you are ready for another day of legally sanctioned starvation. You wear the same tunic every day not because you love it, but because it is the only one that hasn't yet disintegrated. From despair. It is made of hemp, coarse and unyielding, the kind of fabric that scratches your skin like it's trying to remind you of your place in the world. Hemp is cheap, resilient, and unforgiving, like your overseer, like your diet, like the tax code. It started off a pale brown, dyed once by accident when someone spilled rice wine in a fire. Now it's a patchwork of sweat, soot, and the kind of stains you don't describe in polite company. Not that anyone's ever spoken to you politely. The collar is frayed into a soft rebellion. The sleeves were long once, but now they hover indecisively at the elbows, each fray a quiet surrender to time and labor. Your belt is a rope, literally. Pulled from a discarded grain sack, tied twice because once isn't enough to keep the tunic closed and 3 times might be considered decorative, which would be presumptuous for a Jianmin. You tighten it just enough to remind yourself that you still have ribs. Underneath, if you dare to look, your underclothes are a ghost story. A single layer of old linen, stitched and restitched until it resembles a spider's regret. You wash it monthly in the canal with the same brush used to clean cooking pots and curse words off of temple walls. The fabric never dries properly. So it molds slightly, a gentle green that smells of heritage and fungal ambition. Sandals, if you have them, are 2 slabs of bark tied with string. They do not cushion. They do not protect. They are ceremonial offerings to the idea of footwear. You walk in them as one walks over a battlefield, carefully, painfully, with constant awareness that every step could be the last thing your toe ever feels. Most days, you go barefoot. The mud is forgiving. The gravel isn't, but at least it teaches you humility. Winter is the worst. The hemp doesn't warm, it holds moisture like a grudge. You shiver through the nights, huddled near a fire that doesn't belong to you, wearing 2 tunics if you can find one left behind by a corpse. When you find lice, and you will, you scratch until you bleed. There are no delassing powders. You boil your clothes when possible, which is never. You've learned to name the bites. You call the large ones governors and the small ones bureaucrats. The ones that crawl near your groin. Ministers of internal affairs. In summer, the tunic becomes a sweat sponge. The fibers darken and stick to your body like societal shame. The smell is rich, lead, notes of ammonia, old onions, despair. You learn to recognize other Jianmin by scent alone. It is our version of perfume. You once tried to patch a hole in your shoulder seam with a piece of discarded silk from the magistrate's refuse. For this innovation, you were caned. Silk is for poets and tax collectors, not base people. The magistrate's wife said it offended the heavens. You bled on the silk patch. That, she said, was acceptable. Your clothes mark you. You are not permitted color, not legally, not socially. Anything bright or bold is forbidden unless it's blood, and even then, it better not stain the road. You pass a woman in indigo robes and instinctively lower your gaze. She doesn't acknowledge you, but her servant does, by spitting in your direction. The spittle lands on your sandal. You say nothing. You are Jianmin. You don't wear jewelry. Except for an old copper ring flattened into a disc and sewn inside your tunic as a charm against beatings. It hasn't worked yet, but you're afraid to remove it. Superstition is the poor man's armor. You own a hat. Straw, bent, ragged. Useless against sun, worse against rain. But you wear it because not wearing a hat implies you're proud of your face, and nobody at the bottom should look proud of anything. You wrap a cloth around your neck to stop the dust, which only stops the wind from reminding you you're still breathing. When the festival days come and people parade in silk and brocade, you stay inside. Not out of shame, but because the constables might mistake your hunger for envy, and envy is punishable by arrest, especially when it looks like eye contact. You once touched a nobleman's discarded robe. Just touched it, like it was an artifact. For that, you were fined. The robe was burned. You were told your hands were contaminated by your birth. You believed them. Because when you look down at your own tunic, stiff with yesterday's sweat, today's mud, and a generation's worth of hopeless threading, you understand. This isn't clothing. It's classification. It's your resume, your family tree, your obituary in fabric form. You are Jianmin. Your wardrobe is your sentence. And it fits. You don't smile unless absolutely necessary, and even then, it's a grimace disguised as joy, a bearing of gums and a performance of civility that fools no one and offends everyone. Your teeth, what's left of them, are not white, not straight. Not even aligned to each other's continued existence. They are a scattered, yellowing militia of enamel and pain, standing awkward post-like disgraced sentries in a collapsing fortress. You've never owned a toothbrush. The concept exists somewhere among the upper class, rumored in court poetry and the quiet chatter of courtesans who powder their faces and rinse their mouths with peach blossom infusions. You, on the other hand, chew willow twigs when available. Which is rarely, and when you do find one, it's gnawed down to a splintered prayer within the hour. Sometimes you scrub your gums with a rag and rice husks, which is less cleaning and more exfoliating your last remaining molars into retirement. Every meal is an assault. Your food, boiled and gritty, is half sustenance, half dental sabotage. Millet paste still clings to chaff, bread contains as much stone as it does grain. You grind it with flat teeth and pretend the cracking sound isn't coming from your mouth. If you're lucky, it's just your jaw clicking from malnutrition. If you're not, it's the last standing incisor finally surrendering to time and pottage. Pain is constant. A dull throb that waxes with the seasons. In winter, the cold turns your gums into exposed nerves. In summer, the humidity breeds bacteria. So thick you swear your tongue has its own politics. You've named the worst aches. There's old thunder in the back left, sharp, sudden, rage-filled, and whisper up front, quiet but persistent, a gentle reminder that rot works patiently. Infection is not a risk, it's a reality. You've had abscesses swell until your face looked like a bruised melon. You lanced one yourself with a sharpened bone, holding a cloth soaked in rice wine between your teeth and whispering curses at every deity who ever looked away. The pus smelled like ancestral disappointment. The swelling went down. Your faith did not recover. You can't afford medicine, and anyway, the village healer prescribes boiled frog and rhubarb wine for everything from toothache to demonic possession. Once he smeared honey on your jaw and chanted to the spirit of firewood. The pain laughed in your face. When it gets unbearable, you bite on a rope and dig out the offender with a nail or a rusted spoon. Blood tastes metallic, a change from your usual diet of despair and congealed rice. Sometimes a neighbor helps. Sometimes you do it alone. No one celebrates the extraction. No one congratulates you for survival. There is no applause in agony. Just silence and the warm drip of your own marrow leaking down your throat. Children mock your grin. The landlord's son calls you gumboy. You once scared a piglet just by yawning. You used to find it funny. You don't laugh anymore. Not because you've lost your sense of humor, but because your jaw locks every time you try. Lockjaw. It happened to your cousin. He starved in front of a bowl of soup he could no longer sip. They buried him with his mouth still clenched, as if he died biting back a curse. No one spoke at the funeral. It felt appropriate. There are no mirrors in your world, only water basins. You avoid them. The sight of your own mouth is enough to curdle your appetite, which is dangerous, because hunger is your closest friend and longest relationship. You've tried chewing on mint leaves, charcoal, even burnt tea. Nothing helps. Your breath could. Peel the lacquer off a ceremonial drum. Your niece once asked if you were part dog. You said yes and growled. She laughed. It was the last time she sat in your lap. Decay isn't just physical. It's social. You avoid speaking during rice collection. Because the tax clerk holds a scented cloth to his face every time you open your mouth. Last year, he accused you of trying to curse him. You got 5 lashes and a warning. Now you nod a lot and use gestures. You communicate like a silent film actor in a documentary about starvation. People say you're quiet. That's generous. You're surviving with the few teeth you have left and not drawing attention to their absence. Your dream used to be food. Then it was warmth. Now it's dentistry. Not the luxury of it, just the idea that one day your mouth won't be a battlefield. You imagine a soft sponge. A clean tool. Maybe a numbing salve. Maybe someone touching your face without recoiling. But dreams are expensive and you've already paid in enamel. So you clamp your jaws, swallow your saliva like acid, and keep your mouth shut. Because you are Jianmin. And your smile is a wound. You do not work for wages. You work because someone has to suffer, and your bloodline has proven remarkably competent at that task. Labor is not a job, it's a hereditary curse, passed down like a poorly stitched robe that chafes the soul. You are Jianmin, and your existence is a legal footnote, your worth measured in rice quotas and calluses, your rebellion contained by hunger and ancestral debt. Today, like every day, begins with a task that does not benefit you. You haul stones for a granary you will never see filled. Not because it's far away, but because the grain inside will be taxed, stored, and consumed by people who use your name as a metaphor for failure. You arrive at the site before the sun finishes stretching. The overseer's stick is already warmed by the morning's first misunderstanding. You bow before he speaks. This is not respect, it's preemptive damage control. You carry baskets of stone, not by wheelbarrow, which is reserved for artisans, but on a bamboo pole slung across your shoulders like a yoke for an ox with opinions. The rocks are slick from last night's rain. Your back is a map of old injuries, none of which healed correctly. Your fingers are swollen, your knees a series of echoing protests, your ankles decorated with bites from insects too poor to aim higher on the food chain. The worksite smells of lime, sweat, and bureaucratic decay. There are no breaks. There are pauses when the foreman forgets to scream. You use those moments to suck air through your teeth and flex the hand that still cramps from last week's whipping. You carry bricks up a slope made of dirt, water, and tragic optimism. You slip twice. The second time, a stone lands on your foot. You swallow the scream because noise implies energy, and you need to save that for the 10 more trips you still owe. Your friend who used to carry double loads said it would get him noticed. He's gone now. Drafted for a road building project up north. You wrote his name in the dirt behind your hut. It rained. Now it's gone. Your tools are basic. A shovel made from a broken door nailed to a pole. A hammer shaped like betrayal. A rope that's more philosophical than functional. You've named them. They are the only co-workers who don't speak down to you. You once asked for gloves. The overseer laughed so hard he nearly fell into the foundation pit. Said a Jianmin with gloves is like a pig in silk, funny, but impractical. You wear your bare hands like second skin. They bleed. You wipe them on your tunic, which now carries your DNA like a resignation letter. The labor is unrelenting. It's not about speed. It's about suffering. If you move too fast, you're accused of showing off. Too slow, and you're whipped for laziness. Just right. That's a fairy tale told to children before they inherit your shift. Women work too. Your cousin Mai grinds grain until her knuckles crack. She's 8 months pregnant. The overseer told her the baby doesn't count unless it's breathing. And taxed. Her husband was reassigned to ditch duty after he asked for a half day to bury his father. They buried the father. The husband got 10 lashes. Mai still limps from last season's flood when she slipped on a mud brick step and tore something inside her hip. She walks like a question mark. No one answers. The midday sun doesn't warm, it interrogates. Your skin peels in thin, accusatory strips. You are not given water. You are allowed to catch rain in your hands or suck on pebbles. A man did that once last year. Choked. Died. The foreman said, "Good. One less mouth." His body was buried beneath the granary foundation. You step on him daily. You don't know his name. You try not to think about it. Lunch is theoretical. You get a handful of rice if someone remembered to count you during morning roll call. Today, they didn't. You chew air and call it fasting. The Buddhist worker beside you smiles. Says it brings him closer to enlightenment. You want to hit him with your shovel. Instead, you nod. Enlightenment sounds exhausting. Afternoon blurs into evening. Your shoulders stop hurting, not from relief, but because the nerves have surrendered. Your legs buckle once. You say it's a cramp. It's not. It's fatigue masquerading as stroke. You drink canal water on the way home. It tastes like mosquito eggs and regret. Your niece greets you with a hug. You pretend you're not too sore to bend. You tell her you built a wall today. She claps. You don't tell her it's a wall she'll be taxed to maintain. You don't tell her she'll dig its ditches if she's lucky, clean its drains if she's not. You are Jianmin. You don't work to live. You live to be worked. You don't own rice, rice owns you. It's the currency, the curse, and the covenant between your ribs and the bureaucracy that wants to count every grain you might someday dream of digesting. You wake, not with the sun, but with the sound of the rice tally officer banging on doors like a landlord possessed. It's tax season, which is every season, and the state demands its share of your misery in neatly bundled sheaves of paddy yield. You don't argue. You can't. You are Jianmin. And your voice is not a legal entity. You owe the grain regardless of what your field produced, regardless of the flood that came too early, or the locusts that came too late, or the fact that the field isn't technically yours. It's the landlord's, but you owe the tax because you touched it. That's how it works. You till, he profits, the magistrate smiles, and you survive if they let you. The tax official wears robes dyed in official blue, carries a brush with more authority than your body has bones, and frowns like it's policy. He calls your name, but mispronounces it, then asks if you've been a good subject of the sun. Of heaven. You nod so deeply your neck cracks. Your daughter once asked who the son of heaven was. You said it's the man who eats your breakfast and calls it divine providence. The officer has 2 guards with him, each carrying a staff tipped in bronze, not for decoration but for persuasion. Behind them, a scribe records your debt in ink made from soot and social hierarchy. He scratches your name into a bamboo ledger like he's chiseling it into your tomb. Your owed amount is 20 dao. You harvested 15. You owe 5 more. The officer suggests you borrow the shortfall from the grain storehouse, which means accepting a loan with interest calculated by a sadist. Last year, you borrowed 10 dao. You're still paying it back with this year's 10 fingers. If you don't pay, they take other things, tools, clothes, firewood, children. Not forever, just long enough to break the spirit and keep the precedent. You sign with your thumbprint, a bloody smudge on a contract you can't read. You don't need to read it. You can feel the terms settling into your spine. Your wife says nothing. She's kneeling beside the rice bundles, tying them with frayed hemp twine. Her hands are cracked, red from husking. Each knot is a prayer to avoid confiscation. She doesn't look up when the officer counts, just nods when he tuts at the shortfall. You don't speak. You don't beg. That's how your cousin lost his teeth. Pleading suggests you think mercy is on the menu. It isn't. They take your 5 dao and remind you that your service to the dynasty is appreciated. You bow. They walk away. You don't straighten until they are out of sight. Your back throbs, but at least it's still yours. The remaining rice is stored in clay jars buried beneath your sleeping mat. Hidden from rats, weather, and officials. You cover it with straw and guilt. It will last a week if you ration it like a miser with a death wish. Your children will eat first. You'll pretend to be full. Your stomach will protest, then learn. Obedience. Hunger is generational. It teaches faster than schools. You once dreamed of saving rice for a festival. A dumpling stuffed with date paste. A sweet you hadn't tasted since childhood. That dream ended the night your uncle was jailed for hoarding surplus. They found 2 jars. He said they were for winter. They said he was stealing from the emperor's mouth. He came back 3 months later, missing an ear and most of his memories. Now he weaves mats and smiles at trees. The grain you give doesn't stay in the village. It travels down river, upstream, across mountains. Some feeds soldiers. Some feeds monks. Most feeds the imperial capital, Jianmin, where nobles dine on glutinous pearls soaked in honey and complain about the texture. You once saw a painting of the emperor's banquet. Silver trays. Gold chopsticks. Rice molded into shapes of birds and flowers. You laughed so hard you choked on your own saliva. You've never seen silver, and your chopsticks are 2 sticks whittled from a broom handle. But the emperor eats, and so must you, scraps, husks, leftovers dried and fried until they snap like twigs between your teeth. You teach your children to eat slowly, to chew each mouthful like it's sacred. Because it is. Each bite is a rebellion against your odds. Each bowl a monument to survival. But always, the rice is watching. Counted. Measured. Expected. If you falter, if you fail, if you feed your family before you feed the empire, you risk being labeled a thief. And thieves do not get second harvests. You are Jianmin. You do not farm to eat. You farm to owe. Rain is not romantic in the Tang Dynasty. It is not poetic, not cleansing, not some gentle drumbeat on a tiled roof while you sip tea and contemplate the Tao. You are not a poet. You are not inside. You are Jianmin, and when it rains, you get wet, you get sick, and you get forgotten. The thatched roof above your head leaks in places that defy geometry. It drips strategically onto your sleeping mat, onto your cooking pot, onto your only shirt. The thatch was patched with hope and done last season, and both have since dissolved. Under the acidic humility of heaven's piss. You lie on your side to avoid the worst of the drips, listening to the steady plop of rain through your ceiling like the ticking of a clock that counts down to your next bout of bronchitis. Outside, the paths between huts have turned into rivers of regret. Mud cakes your sandals, which were already falling apart when the clouds rolled in, and now cling to your soles like wet shame. The world smells of rot, rice husks, spoiled fish, human skin trapped too long under the same layer of linen. Your skin itches. You ignore it. Scratching only confirms the presence of fungus. Better to pretend it's just weather. The cold is a claw. It slips into your clothes like a debt collector and refuses to leave. There is no insulation in your walls, no warm hearth, no kindling that hasn't already been burned or traded. You huddle around a clay brazier that exhales smoke. Like a dying ox. The heat doesn't warm, it teases. It suggests the idea of comfort and then pulls it away like the state pulling back your rice allotment because the inspector decided your knees didn't buckle dramatically enough during tax season. Summer doesn't save you. When the rain stops, the sun begins its assault. You are baked where you stand, in your own sweat, which pulls in your collar, your waistband, your dignity. Your tunic darkens like a warning. You smell like labor's corpse. The sun in Tang China does not shine, it interrogates. You are not kissed by it, you are interrogated, flayed, boiled slowly in the steam of your own insignificance. The canals dry up by late summer, leaving behind sludge, bones, and the dreams of fish. Water becomes currency again. You fight mosquitoes at dawn and drink from puddles by dusk. The rain will return, but not in time. You ration water like medicine, like blood. The monsoon is your harvest. When it hits, the village floods, but at least the jars refill. You line your pots under the broken eaves and pray they catch enough to keep your niece from drinking canal slime that killed 2 old men and a goat last year. The old say nature is balanced. They say wind and fire and rain follow the patterns of heaven. If so, heaven is deeply invested in your personal destruction. The wind tears through the village in spring, knocking over the rice stalks and your neighbor's self-worth. Your walls shake like a bureaucrat denying your petition. Dust fills your eyes and mouth. You breathe it in. You become part of the land, unwillingly, tragically. Dust settles in your nose and memory. One gust took the roof off your uncle's hut last year. He built a new one. It fell. He didn't rebuild. He moved in with you. He talks to ghosts now. You let him. They are better company than most of the living. Winter arrives with no snow. Only a colder version of your regular suffering. Your mat stiffens. Your joints refuse to bend without negotiation. You sleep cold like a comma, unfinished and tentative. When you breathe, the air fogs in front of your face and you trace pictures in it just to remind yourself you're still here. Your children cough. You tell them it's just the cold. You lie. It's always the cold. And the wet. And the mold. And the worms. And the insects. And the famine that rides in on the back of every season like a government official sent to audit your pain. You survive each one by accident. There is no strategy, only inertia. You work because moving generates warmth. You pray because it gives your mouth something to do other than cry. You don't talk about the weather. The weather talks through you. It writes its story on your skin, in your lungs, in the curve of your spine bent double under firewood soaked in irony. You are Jianmin. And your climate is a punishment written in wind, rain, and sun. You drink because you must, not because you trust. In Tang Dynasty China, water is not a gift. It's a gamble with parasites, a wager against cholera, and a daily roll of the celestial dice where the prize is survival and the penalty is a week of vomiting blood into a rice husk. You fill your jar at the community well if it's not dried up or contaminated by a dead chicken floating just below the surface. The bucket comes up creaking, algae clinging to its sides like rumors in a bureaucrat's ledger. The water looks clean, clear enough to reflect your face, pale enough to impersonate purity, but you know better. The last time it looked this innocent, your cousin swallowed a mouthful and spent 3 days curled around his own stomach like a dying snake. He made it. His intestines didn't. That's why you boil it now when firewood permits, which is to say, occasionally and with guilt. Every stick you burn is one less to trade, one less to cook with, one less to warm your niece's hands when winter peels back her nails like reluctant petals. The boiling process is ceremonial. You squat over the brazier, waiting for the bubbles. Like a priest waits for a sign from heaven. You stir it with a chopstick, listen to it pop, and wonder which disease just blinked out of existence. You skim off the top layer of ash with a rag and sip it through clenched teeth, trying not to think of the frog spawn you once found in a batch that had sat too long. On bad days, there's no time to boil. You drink straight from the ditch. You tell yourself the flow keeps it clean. You know that upstream, the butcher's runoff bleeds into it every morning. You know that someone bathed in it last night, someone with open sores and nowhere else to go. You know that the worms in your gut have been naming their children after the weeks you keep them alive. But thirst is immediate. And immediate wins. The richer villagers have clay urns lined with charcoal. The landlord has a filter made of silk and silver, blessed by a monk who once claimed to turn rainwater into wine. You have a gourd with a crack in it and a filter made of your own despair. You strain water through linen so thin it qualifies as existential commentary. If it drips slow, you call it clean. If it doesn't kill you in a day, you call it safe. Your body adapts. Not through health, but through familiarity. You develop a stomach lining so cynical it deserves a government post. You digest sludge and leach eggs like an alchemist making broth from curses. Your urine turns dark, then clearer, then dark again. You consider this fluctuation a weather report. Bathing is a separate catastrophe. The river is closer, but more offensive. It stinks of dead fish and half-spoken confessions. You bathe once a week, sometimes twice if you've bled onto yourself in public again. Soap is theoretical. You use sand, crushed leaves, and the last hope you haven't yet exhaled. The result is friction masquerading as cleanliness. You emerge. Raw, pink, vulnerable. The first breeze feels like regret. Your skin cracks. Insects find the cracks. You itch, but can't afford to scratch. Blood attracts flies. Flies attract questions. You share the river with animals, other peasants, the occasional corpse, and every god who's ever doubted your sincerity. You saw a monk once, washing his robe just downstream of a cow urinating into the current. He was humming. You tried not to laugh. You respected the effort. Your niece asked why the water smells like sadness. You told her it's the scent of working hard. She nodded like she understood. She didn't. But someday she will. The irony is that water is sacred. Every temple has a basin for ritual purification. Every festival features pouring it over statues to ensure good harvests. You once asked a priest if the water was holy. He said it was drawn from a private spring on temple land, filtered through stone, and blessed with chants. You asked if you could drink some. He asked if you had an offering. You offered your bowl. He offered the exit. So you returned to the ditch, the canal, the rain barrel you fashioned from a cracked wine jar and bound with rope. You pray it rains tonight. Not too hard. Flooding would ruin your mat again, but hard enough to flush out the frogs and fill your jars without also inviting typhoid. You whisper to the clouds, offering them your thanks and your knees. You promise not to waste a drop. You promise to filter it, boil it, share it. You lie. You'll drink it the moment it falls, lips open, eyes closed, hoping the sky forgot to be cruel today. Because you are Jianmin. And water does not cleanse you. It dares you. You don't catch diseases, they catch you, drag you into the mud, and whisper promises of release that never arrive. There is no diagnosis, no name, no whispered Latin phrase to give it dignity. There is only a burning gut, a sweating brow, and a sickbed that looks suspiciously like the same patch of floor where you eat your dinner and birth your children. It starts with a fever. Of course it does. In Tang Dynasty China, fevers are the body's way of announcing that something inside you has turned traitor. You sweat through your tunic, which you haven't changed in a week, and shiver beneath a blanket that smells like old soup and regret. You mutter. Not prayers. Just half-formed curses, slurred apologies, things you hope your niece never hears. She's the one wiping your forehead with a damp cloth soaked in boiled ditch water, which may or may not be what made you sick in the first place. Nobody knows. The village healer says it's hot wind. You nod, because arguing would expend the energy you're reserving for not dying. He lights incense, waves a chicken feather, and tells you your spleen is angry. You believe him, because your spleen is probably the least content organ in your entire torso. He prescribes a paste of dried orange peel, fox bile, and prayers muttered over goat bones. You chew it once, gag, and spend the next hour watching your intestines audition for an escape. You don't return for a follow-up. Others suggest cupping. Heated bamboo cups placed on your back until your skin blisters like it's been judged. The cups leave rings, angry and dark, like bruises from a spiritual debt collector. You endure it, because at least pain means your body is still communicating. You know people who stopped hurting. They died soon after. You once had worms. Not metaphorically. They lived in your gut, danced in your waist, and gave your belly the cheerful swell of a minor aristocrat. You named them after officials, fat, useless, and impossible to remove. The remedy was powdered rhubarb and fasting. You tried both. The worms stayed. You eventually made peace with them. What choice did you have? You've had boils, angry, pus-filled empires erupting across your back, sometimes your thighs. You drained them with a heated needle. No anesthetic. Just a rag between your teeth and a prayer to die faster. The smell is biblical. You don't talk about it. Everyone smelled worse. Coughs are seasonal. They arrive in winter and leave with whoever dies first. Your uncle's cough stayed 2 years. It wheezed like a leaking bellows and punctuated every sentence with blood. When it finally stopped, so did he. You buried him with a sprig of mint in his mouth. Not for ritual, but to mask the stench. It didn't work. You wonder sometimes how the nobles stay healthy. Maybe their rice is cleaner. Maybe they don't drink the same water as pigs. Maybe their god listens better. In Jianmin, the court physicians know anatomy. They've read the treatise on cold damage. They use acupuncture, ginseng, ground pearls, and if you're lucky, Buddhist chants harmonized with Taoist herbs. You are not lucky. Your healer uses willow bark and optimism. You once saw a court eunuch pass through the village, wrapped in silks, pale as rice paper, his skin untouched by sun or suffering. He sneezed once and 6 servants leapt to offer handkerchiefs, tonics, apologies. You stepped aside, holding your breath. Not out of respect, but because you were contagious and didn't want to be blamed. They would have blamed you anyway. You've seen people exiled for less. There's a belief that sickness is a moral failing. That illness descends on the unclean, the lazy, the impure. Which is ironic, since you've never worked harder, never been cleaner, never prayed more sincerely. But belief isn't about fairness. It's about convenience. And you are very convenient. When your fever breaks, you emerge from your mat like something half-cooked. Your limbs ache, your mouth tastes like boiled leather, and your head swims with memories of the gods you begged for mercy. You survived. Again. You eat kanji, 1 spoonful at a time, hoping it stays down. You pretend the rice doesn't taste like dust and that your body doesn't feel like a temple after the fire. Your knee smiles. You smile back. It hurts your lips. That's how you know it's real. You are Jianmin. You are not healed. You are not safe. But you're upright. And for now, that's enough. You are not just poor. You are structurally, institutionally, cosmically poor. There is a difference. Poverty might mean a bad harvest, a missing ox, a father who drank away the family millet. But being Jianmin in the Tang Dynasty is a social sentence etched into the legal code, divine order, and every landlord's knowing smirk. You are not at the bottom of the hierarchy. You are buried beneath it, pinned like an insect specimen in the great museum of the Chinese imperial order, where even the scholars who debate the mandate of heaven agree on one thing: you don't count. Not officially. Not legally. Not spiritually. Your caste is literally defined as base in every document that matters. There are farmers, artisans, merchants, officials, soldiers, people with functions, with honorifics, with names on grain receipts and prayer scrolls. And then there is you. You are unclean by status, not by hygiene. Though you are also unclean by hygiene. It's a package deal. You cannot become a soldier because the army might accidentally train you to stand upright. You cannot become a monk because heaven has standards. You cannot sit for the civil service exam because reading might give you ideas, and ideas, as everyone knows, are the leading cause of rebellion. You work jobs that are necessary but unmentionable. Gravedigger. Executioner's assistant. Butcher of animals no one eats publicly. Sewage hauler. Night soil collector. Slaughterhouse boy. The jobs that make the empire livable and its citizens pure, performed by people declared impure by virtue of performing them. It's a metaphysical catch. 22. Your hands touch the dead, so you are socially dead. You can't marry up. Not that you'd want to. But if you did, if you fell in love with someone from the good people caste, they would be publicly shamed, fined, possibly demoted, and definitely pitted. Your children would be labeled mixed, which means they inherit your stigma but not your resilience. There are officials whose entire job is to track and maintain caste boundaries. They travel with scrolls longer than your life expectancy, listing families, occupations, violations. You once saw one break down a marriage with a single stamp. The couple wept. The official asked for tea. The landlord plays with hierarchy like a child plays with ants. 1 week, he decides to promote his ox to a higher caste. The ox now wears a bell. You do not. You bow to the ox when it passes. It doesn't. Nod back. You are owned, not in the literal chattel sense, though it's close, but by law, by land, by an unspoken agreement signed in famine and desperation generations ago. The contract is not written. It is enacted in every denial, every insult, every silence. You tried once to move villages. Flee the stigma. You arrived, changed your name, told no one. It lasted 3 weeks until a grain inspector recognized your gait. Apparently, even your suffering has posture. They dragged you back, fined your family, and added your alias to the local humiliation wall, where names of criminals and baseborns are etched alongside curses and tax evaders. Now children throw stones at it. You hear your name in their play. Your niece asked why. You told her it's a game. She asked if she could win. You didn't answer. Even among the Jianmin, there are layers. Prostitution is slightly above sewage. Hauling. Animal skinners are beneath butchers, but above tanners. Musicians hover in a strange liminal zone, welcomed at parties, banned from temples. Actors are loved and loathed in equal measure. Everyone looks down. No one looks across. You maintain your status not by climbing but by staying perfectly, obediently still. There is a saying, a Jianmin who dreams stands taller than his station. You have not dreamed in years. You once watched a scribe lose his brush in a canal. You retrieved it. He looked at you as if you'd handed him a corpse. He burned the brush. Said it was tainted. The irony? You're literate. Your mother taught. You with burnt wood and stolen paper scraps. But you never show it. Knowing how to write as a base person is like carrying fire in your mouth. It might warm you, but it will also get you killed. You once wrote a poem about hunger. You buried it in a jar beneath your mat. It rhymed, which is treason. You recite it in your head when the landlord's son kicks mud in your direction. You don't respond. You are Jianmin. And hierarchy is not a system. It's a sport. And you are the ball. You've never seen the emperor. Not even once. But you've seen his shadow, etched on coins you never touch, carved into wooden seals. That deny your petitions, inked onto scrolls announcing decrees that reduce your village rice quota by 2 dao because someone in Chang'an wanted a new garden. He exists not as a man but as a concept, a celestial rumor draped in brocade and divine mandate. To say his name aloud is to invite scrutiny. To speak of him too familiarly is to invite execution. He is not your ruler. He is your weather. Distant. Arbitrary. Occasionally generous. More often disastrous. And completely beyond your reach. You are Jianmin, and your life is organized around someone you will never meet, whose shoes you are not permitted to imagine, let alone see. The local magistrate speaks of the emperor the way monks speak of karma, an invisible, inescapable force that shapes your fate while remaining utterly uninterested in your suffering. When the emperor decrees a new road, you carry the stones. When he orders a temple built, you cut the timber. When he celebrates a new concubine, your taxes go up. Love has economic consequences. You bowed once during a parade. The provincial governor passed through with banners, trumpets, soldiers. At the end of the procession rode a lacquered carriage behind silk curtains. It might have contained a portrait of the emperor. It might have contained a concubine's favorite horse. You bowed anyway. The man next to you forgot. The guard cracked his jaw with the butt of a halberd. He still whistles when he breathes. Statues of the emperor appear in temples and court. Halls, always larger than life, always serene, always untouched by age or grief. You've never seen anyone smile like that without opium or delusion. His robes are drawn in dragon spirals, his beard a waterfall of stylized serenity. He looks nothing like you. Which is the point? His image is meant to remind you that he is chosen by heaven. You are chosen by necessity. You know the emperor's name, though you're not supposed to speak it. It's carved into stone tablets, embroidered into banners, whispered by scribes like it's a magic spell. Sometimes, when the wind is right and your fever low, you whisper it too. Not out of reverence, but out of confusion. How can someone so far away control so much of your hunger? They say the emperor knows everything. That he sends out inspectors in disguise to check on the people. That he reads petitions, listens to grievances, dispenses justice with a brush dipped in wisdom. You once wrote a petition. You bled onto it, sealed it with ash, handed it to a traveling monk who promised to carry it to the prefecture. It disappeared. You assume it became firewood. The monk did not return. Neither did your hope. You hear tales of wise emperors like Taizong, who rode into battle, who listened to criticism, who governed with balance and insight. You wonder if those stories are real, or if they are just bedtime myths for bureaucrats. You've also heard of the bad ones. The ones who bathed in milk, who executed scholars for disagreeing with their poetry, who drained village coffers to build palaces of ice in the desert. You once laughed at one of these stories. Then realized it wasn't a joke. The emperor's word is law, his gaze divine, his appetite infinite. He is both father and predator. And you are both child and prey. Once a year, during the spring festival, the village paints his likeness on red paper, bows to it, burns incense. You bow too. Your niece asks why. You say it's for luck. She asks why he doesn't send any. You tell her the messenger probably got lost. You lie well now. It's a survival skill. You do not hate the emperor. That would imply he's real to you. You resent him like you resent the sun, because it burns, because it blinds, because it never asks if you're ready. You are Jianmin. You live in the margins of the empire, beneath its statues, outside its laws, beneath its notice. And the emperor? He is your shadow. Cold. Indifferent. Always looming. Never near. Faith costs money. Not belief, but the physical act of practicing it. In Tang Dynasty China, you are surrounded by temples, shrines, sutras, incense, chants, bells, relics, gods, demons, and bodhisattvas, but access to any of it requires coin, connections, or clean clothes, and you have none. You are Jianmin, which means your spiritual life is a scavenger hunt through the detritus of other people's enlightenment. You pass a Buddhist temple every morning, red pillars looming like righteous fingers, roofs tiled with glazed laughter, guarded by lions carved from stone richer than your entire village. The monks inside are quiet, serene, wrapped in saffron robes and scented with the kind of incense that costs more per stick than your niece's entire funeral would. You bow when you pass, not out of reverence but because the last time someone didn't, the head monk reported them for disrespect. That man now works double shifts cleaning the latrine pits behind the barracks. His hair turned white in a season. You step around the incense ash that drifts from the steps. It's considered sacred. Your footprints are not. You visit a roadside shrine once a week, an earthen statue of Dazan Bodhisattva missing one hand. And both eyes, dressed in a cloth robe too moldy to identify. You light a candle made from tallow and desperation, kneel in the mud, and mutter the only prayer you remember that doesn't include a request for death. You don't ask for salvation. You asked for no one to die this week. If that's not possible, you asked for the smallest one to be spared. If that's too ambitious, you asked for a painless ending. You were told Taoism is simpler, cleaner, more in tune with nature. You tried. You carved a talisman out of bamboo, burned it under the moon, and waited for your cough to ease. The next morning, your hut collapsed. You haven't tried since. Taoist priests charge for charms, offer consultations that cost 3 ducks and a goat. You offered a poem once. They laughed. The charm seller said you must have mistaken art for currency. You haven't written since. Confucianism doesn't offer prayers. It offers obligations. You are already drowning in those. Every time you walk past the village school, where sons of farmers learn to read analects and recite moral codes, you think of your niece struggling to tie her sandals. She will never quote Mencius. She will never hold a brush unless it's dipped in dung and used to scrub walls. The moral order Confucius praised never imagined you. There's a festival coming soon, Ghost Festival, where families burn paper houses, paper clothes, paper servants for their ancestors in the afterlife. You will burn nothing, because paper is for petitions and you've used your quota. Your ancestors get silence. Your ghosts remain naked. Sometimes you wonder if they are angry. You don't go to mass prayer gatherings. You're not banned, technically. You're just discouraged with glares, with coughs of disapproval, with seeding assignments that place you behind pillars, out of earshot, near the goat pens. One time, during a spring solstice blessing, a priest sprinkled holy water on everyone except you. The drops stopped in the air, rerouted by status. He said it was the God's will. You believed him. You are told to respect the three teachings, Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism, as pillars of harmony. You live among termites. Your religion is survival. Your holy text is a ledger. Your daily rite is a repetition of pain. Your gods are not deities. They are people you can't offend. Your offerings are not symbolic. They are your last handful of grain. You've known people who abandoned faith. Not because they stopped believing, but because they couldn't afford the performance. One woman painted her own altar using red clay and candle soot. She offered boiled leaves. She was accused of heresy. The temple fined her a chicken. She had none. Her hut was dismantled. They called it purification. You don't speak of faith openly anymore. When your child is sick, you mutter to the stove god and leave a coin at his brick feet. It's your last coin. You pretend it's not. You boil a soup made from weeds and whisper thanks for the illusion of taste. You bow to the north, then the west, then the sky, just in case. You cover all your bases. You don't believe in divine justice. You believe in plausible deniability. You are Jianmin. Your soul is not yours. It's leased, regulated, observed. And you are behind on your spiritual rent. There are rules for everything in the Tang Dynasty, and by rules, what they mean is a heavily footnoted collection of don'ts written by men who haven't lifted anything heavier than a brush in their lives, enforced by men who very much have, and experienced by you, Jianmin, with all the softness of a boot to the ribs. Laws don't protect you. They define how precisely you can be punished before it becomes awkward for the magistrate. Spoke too loudly near a procession. That's public disturbance, 5 lashes. Walked in front of a nobleman's horse. That's obstructing dignity, 10 lashes and a formal apology you can't write. Didn't kneel fast enough when the tax scroll was read aloud. That's implied defiance, which is 30 lashes or 3 days in the stocks, depending on how creative the bailiff feels. You've done both. The lashes sting. The stocks leave splinters in places you're not supposed to have splinters. Your back is a map of bureaucratic overreach. The scars cross like poorly aligned brushstrokes, each one a punctuation mark in the official manuscript of your humiliation. You don't even flinch anymore when the cane whistles through the air. You count the strikes not by number, but by the different shades of pain. First comes the slap of wood on fabric, then the burn of exposed flesh, then the deep bloom of ache that settles in your bones like unpaid debt. After that, it's mostly philosophical. The law says Jianmin can't own property, marry a free woman, or ride a horse. Once you were caught astride a donkey while hauling bricks. The inspector didn't care that your feet were dragging in the mud. Elevated position, he declared, and knocked you down with a swing of his staff. The donkey ran off. The inspector laughed. You limped home and haven't sat above knee level since. Theft is punished harshly. But hunger is not a defense. Neither is starvation. Your cousin stole a yam. A single yam. They tied him to a post and made the village watch as they flogged him until the blood ran into the irrigation ditch. The yam was returned. The village didn't eat that week. No one complained. Complaining is itself a crime, undermining social harmony. It carries a penalty of hard labor or tongue piercing. You've seen both. You've learned to smile with your eyes and lie with your teeth. You speak in praise, even when you curse. You mutter prayers instead of oaths, because the gods might listen and the guards definitely do. There is a cage in the market square for public correction. You've been in it twice. Once for letting your ox graze on state grass, once for suggesting the temple taxes were excessive. Both times, you shared the cage with a chicken thief and a woman who was too loud about her dead baby. The chicken thief smelled like vinegar and loss. The woman didn't speak. You all slept sitting up, in shifts, because lying down was considered disrespectful. The cage isn't about security. It's about spectacle. You are the warning sign others step over. Your name becomes a byword for disobedience. Children point. Elders nod. The officials eat melon seeds and debate whether your lashes should be vertical or diagonal. There are also fines. Fines for everything. Stepping where you shouldn't. Speaking to someone you shouldn't. Breathing the wrong way during a procession. You once got fined for inappropriate facial expression during a shrine dedication. You just passed a kidney stone. Try smiling through that. They took your winter blanket. You didn't sleep warm until spring. Justice, when it comes, is a ritual. You kneel before a scribe who doesn't look up, while your accuser, a merchant, a monk, a minor clerk, repeats a version of events that bleeds detail and drips certainty. You are not allowed to speak unless spoken to. You nod at the right times. You apologize even if you don't know what you're apologizing for. You offer your back or your wallet. Sometimes both. The law is written, but enforcement is oral. It speaks in dialects of disdain. You've memorized its tone. Your niece once asked if laws are meant to keep people safe. You said yes. Then you took her to see the punishment of a boy who stole fish guts to feed his blind mother. He was 10. He wept. His mother wept harder. The crowd didn't blink. She never asked again. You are Jianmin. You breathe quietly. You kneel quickly. You bleed politely. Because punishment here isn't the result of crime. It's the price of participation. If you think it's hard being a Jianmin, try doing it with a uterus. Being born poor in the Tang Dynasty is a sentence, but being born a poor woman is a recursive punishment, a daily performance of endurance where your value is measured not in years lived but in wombs emptied, meals skipped, and bruises worn like invisible badges of domestic achievement. From the moment a girl draws breath, the world begins narrowing for her, not gently, but with the methodical efficiency of a bureaucrat. Stamping decline notices. You're born crying, wrapped in scraps, and greeted not with joy but with thin-lipped disappointment and the question of what to do with another mouth that can't carry bricks. Your mother hides her sadness well. She's had practice. She still bears the tear from when she birthed you squatting in a rice field during a locust swarm. She bit through the umbilical cord herself. There was no ceremony. No rest. Just more work and the unspoken hope that maybe this girl child won't die before the next thrust. You're useful by age 4. You feed pigs, haul water, wipe old men's chins. By 6, you've mastered silence. By 8, your knees are calloused from kneeling in service and penance. You learn to cook with nothing, clean what can't be cleaned, and endure what can't be spoken. Your first blood comes during monsoon season. You tell no one. There's no cloth, no guidance, no understanding. You tear a strip from the rag. You sleep under, shove it between your legs, and pretend it's a fever. You bleed for 5 days and work through it all. No one notices. Menstrual blood is shameful. If it leaks, you are mocked. If it doesn't, you're suspicious. The body that will betray you for the next 30 years has begun its campaign early. Marriage is not a choice. It is a transaction brokered by desperation and proximity. You are betrothed before you know what that word means. Your husband is 10 years older, already balding, with hands like cracked bowls and a cough that spells out your next 10 winters. The wedding consists of rice wine, pig fat, and your body shaking in a rented robe. You are not celebrated. You are absorbed. Dowry. You brought a duck in a basket. He accepted it. You gave him sons. One died in infancy, the second lives with a limp, the third might reach adulthood if the rats don't get to the millet again. You work in the fields beside him, grind grain, wash his clothes, nurse his injuries, swallow his anger. If he hits you, no one asks why. They ask what you did. There are no laws against spousal abuse for Jianmin. The state assumes discipline is part of marriage. You wear bruises like shadow jewelry, each one a reminder of your vows. You give birth squatting in the corner of your own hut, alone. Midwives cost too much and gossip too loud. You bleed and scream into a fistful of straw while your daughter emerges blue and silent. She lives. You almost don't. There's no medicine. No herbs. Just boiled water and a prayer you mumbled between contractions. The afterbirth is buried in the garden. It fertilizes turnips. You name her quietly, without ceremony. You nurse her with watery millet and hope. She cries a lot. You apologize. Every time. If you're widowed, which is likely, men die early, especially ones who drink and dig, you become even more vulnerable. A single woman is a social question. A poor single woman is a public threat. The elders suggest remarriage. You nod. Refusing would make you a witch. Witches are drowned, or worse, talked about. If you show any independence, any resistance, if you speak too confidently or don't flinch at insults, the neighbors start whispering. A widow who doesn't beg must be hiding something. A woman who reads, who heals with herbs, who doesn't cry when her child dies, she's dangerous. You've seen it. A woman dragged from her hut, accused of bewitching a sick ox. They shaved her head, spat on her, beat her. She confessed. They drowned her anyway. The ox recovered. No one apologized. Your religion tells you to be obedient. Your society tells you to be invisible. Your family tells you to endure. And you do. Because stopping is not an option. Because no one remembers women who don't keep going. You are Jianmin. You are a woman. And your suffering must be graceful, or it will be punished. Your son is 5 when he lifts his first stone, not a pebble for play, but a chunk of grey misery meant for a wall that won't be finished. Before his back bends permanently. He doesn't cry. Not because it doesn't hurt, but because he's already watched grown men scream from beatings and boys like him disappear for crying at the wrong time. In the Tang Dynasty, childhood is not a phase, it's a brief rehearsal. For servitude, and if you're Jianmin, it starts early, ends badly, and is mostly skipped. There is no school. No toys. No lullabies not interrupted by the screams of night watchmen drunk on power and rice wine. His education comes in the form of repetition, carry, stack, kneel, repeat. His father teaches him how to avoid the overseers. Blind spot, how to shuffle faster when his legs are too numb to walk, how to breathe without inhaling too much dust because coughing sounds like weakness and weakness invites attention and attention is always a predator. His hands are too small to grip the full width of a brick, so he uses both arms, cradling it like an offering to a god who only answers with silence and blisters. His tunic is a cut-down version of yours, stitched together from scraps of clothes that once belonged to people who made the mistake of dying without permission. The sleeves drag. The collar is too wide. But it's the only thing keeping the sun off his neck, and the only barrier between his skin and the accusations of idleness. When he falls, and he does, daily, he is taught not to gasp. Just grit. His teeth, stand up, and pretend the blood on his knee is mud. Blood is cheaper. You watch him from across the workyard, carrying a load he's not strong enough to bear, and you don't intervene. Not because you don't care. But because you can't afford to. If he drops it, it's your wages that suffer. If he breaks it, it's his back. You pray for neither. You only pray now in whispers, in moments, in fragments of rituals you know. Longer remember in full. Your son's prayer is different. His is movement, small, precise, dutiful. He learns to read faces, not scrolls. To know the rhythm of the whip crack before it lands. To identify which guards have mercy and which have ambition. He learns to smile only when no one's watching and to keep his gaze low enough to avoid offense but high enough not to seem insolent. By 7, he knows how to tie a load to a yoke, how to balance without shaking, how to fake strength when his limbs are water and every joint aches like it's been stuffed with fire. His voice cracks early. Not from puberty, but from inhaling charcoal dust and swallowing orders barked like accusations. He doesn't ask questions. Questions are luxuries for people who don't dig latrines or sleep beside livestock. Once, he asked what school was like. You told him it's where other boys learn how to command, not how to obey. He didn't ask again. At 8, he can carry half your weight and twice your fear. He hasn't had a full meal in weeks, just rice, skins and sour turnip broth. He eats quickly, not from hunger, but from reflex. The slow eaters starve. The thoughtful ones fall behind. By 10, he's strong. Not healthy, just muscular from repetition and malnourishment, a contradiction sculpted. By poverty, his body is becoming adult faster than his mind, and that's the point. The system isn't interested in his ideas, just his capacity to lift and endure. He knows to call the landlord's son and master, even when they are the same age. He bows lower than necessary, just in case the boy woke up angry. He's been kicked before for not smiling fast enough. He thanked them for the lesson. When your son gets sick, which he will, everyone does, you hide it. You smear mud on his cheeks to hide the fever flush, tell him to cough only when the guards are distracted, whisper that pain is just a signal to try harder. There is no medicine, no healer willing to treat a base-born boy with no coin and no future. If he collapses, you'll carry him home and hope he wakes up. If he doesn't, you'll bury him in the ditch behind the kill and go back to work. The bricks still need stacking. The rice still needs earning. The world doesn't pause for grief. Not for your kind. You are Jianmin. And your son was never a child. He was born into labor, raised by exhaustion, and trained by necessity. You love him. But love is not protection. It's just another burden he carries. Sleep isn't rest, it's a negotiation with misery, a strategy for surviving the hours when your body stops screaming loudly enough for you to hear it over the silence. In Tang Dynasty China, and especially as Jianmin, sleep is not something you do, it's something that happens to you when fatigue knocks hard enough to flatten consciousness and override caution. Your bed is not a bed. It's a mat, maybe, if you were lucky enough to scavenge straw from a disused shed, flattened over earth that shifts with every rat, beetle, and ancestor's curse beneath it. The mat smells of mildew and wet feet. It's never dry. Nothing is ever dry. Moisture seeps in from the roof when it rains and from your own back when it doesn't. The walls don't block wind so much as whisper it in, a slow caress that feels like someone else's breath. Cold in winter, suffocating in summer, loud when you want silence, silent when you wish someone would at least cough to prove they are still alive. You don't sleep alone. That's a luxury reserved for monks, widows, and the dead. You sleep beside your children, beside your spouse, beside your regrets. There are no partitions. No privacy. You turn over and your elbow jabs a cousin who never left after his house collapsed 3 floods ago. He snores like a remorseful ox. You hate him, but not enough to kick him out. There's nowhere for him to go that isn't worse. You sleep in shifts. Not by design, but because someone always needs to keep the fire from going out, or hold the child who won't stop coughing, or check the pot for rats. Sometimes you lie awake and pretend you're waiting for sleep. You're not. You're waiting for morning to arrive without another disaster attached. You dream, but only in flashes, vivid, sweating bursts of rice fields, falling, running, water flooding your throat, bricks pinning your chest. You wake more tired than you were before. Sleep gives nothing back. Naps are currency. A 5-minute doze while squatting in the field, one eye open, one hand still holding the hoe. A 10-minute droop over the fire while the gruel bubbles and you pretend not to notice the ash flavor. A half-hour collapse beside a load of wood you couldn't finish carrying. You teach your children how to sleep like prey, lightly, in cold positions, with one ear tuned to footsteps. Not for soldiers, not for tigers. For other desperate people who might mistake your suffering for opportunity. There are stories of sleep robbers, those who sneak into homes and steal bundles, or worse, small children. You've never seen it happen. You still believe it. Fear is a reasonable pillow. In winter, you press your body against others just to survive. Flesh sticks to flesh. Breath smells of turnip gas and unspoken complaints. You pretend not to notice the lice. They don't sleep either. In summer, you sleep outside when the hut turns into a kill. The stars look down without sympathy. The mosquitoes hum like critics. You swat until your arms are streaked with bites and someone else's blood. You sleep through heat stroke, then wake in vomit. Then get up for work. When someone dies in the night, no one notices until morning. Then the body is removed quickly, without ritual. There's no time. Death is a scheduling inconvenience. Your neighbor once died in his sleep with a smile on his face. People said it was a good death. You said he must have been dreaming of somewhere better. They said he was probably delirious. You agreed. It was easier than believing he found peace. Dreams are not for you. They are for poets, painters, princes who recline on cushions embroidered with dragons and stitched by girls who never sleep long enough to remember what rest feels like. You once dreamed of a full meal and woke up chewing your own sleeve. You once dreamed of running and woke up with your leg cramping so hard you screamed. Screaming in your sleep is discouraged. It wakes people. And waking people is a crime against the illusion of hope. You wake before the rooster. Not from discipline. From habit. From fear. From the sheer, aggressive predictability of pain. You sit up. Crack your neck. Shake the insects from your blanket. Tie your sash. The fire is out. The morning is cold. The children are shivering. You didn't rest. But you survived another night. And in this world, sleep is not about dreaming. It's about not dying. You are Jianmin. And you sleep with your eyes half open and your fists already clenched. You don't eat dinner because you're hungry. You eat because it's expected of someone who hasn't starved to death yet. Dinner, if it can be called that, is a ritual of survival performed nightly with the solemnity of a religious sacrifice and the culinary complexity of a muddy bowl. You sit cross-legged in the corner of your hut, where the smoke doesn't sting quite as badly and the floor is only mildly damp. The fire is down to embers, having been coaxed back to life with splinters, dried dung, and sheer wool. A cracked pot simmers on top, your holy relic, your domestic altar, your pot of suffering. Inside it, pottage, which is just a polite term for edible compost. Pottage is whatever didn't rot yet, boiled until it can no longer protest. Turnip skins, millet husks, wild greens with names you don't trust. If you're lucky, there's a fish head bobbing like a martyr, its single cloudy eye still accusing you of something. You stir with a stick. You taste with dread. There is no salt. There is no oil. There is only heat and hope. You serve everyone else first. The children, your spouse, your cousin's widow who still hasn't moved out since the flood 4 years ago. Then, if any's left, you eat. You ladle the dregs into a wooden bowl that smells like every mistake you've ever made, and you chew with the determination of someone who knows tomorrow offers even less. The texture is grainy. The taste is betrayal. You pick around the beetle. You slurp it down. You swallow without comment. Rice is rare, saved for the new year, weddings, and bribes. Wheat is a legend, barley is rationed, and millet is the only constant and unforgiving grain that makes your teeth hurt and your intestines question your decisions. Bread is hard enough to club a rat. You often fantasize about doing exactly that. Sometimes, someone offers a radish, half chewed by insects. You thank them like they handed you a mooncake. Meat is mythical. You haven't tasted pork in months. And when you did, it came from a pig that drowned during a thunderstorm and was only slightly green when carved. You boiled it for 2 days and prayed the gods were too busy to notice. It was the best meal of your year. The smell of food carries. You keep the door closed, not for warmth, but to keep out the stares. Hunger has no shame. Your neighbor once punched his brother over a bowl of dried beans. The magistrate called it a domestic dispute. The brother hasn't spoken since. You drink warm water to feel full. Boiled canal runoff, filtered through a rag you no longer trust but can't afford to replace. It tastes like iron and old fish. You sip carefully. Too fast and it comes back up. Too slow and your children think you're sick. You smile for them. They don't notice your hand shaking. You once tried to grow your own vegetables. The landlord said the soil was his. The guards agreed. They uprooted your garden and fined you a day's labor. You still dream about those radish leaves. You eat in silence, broken only by slurps and the occasional whisper of thanks that doesn't sound quite sincere. Conversation takes energy. Laughter is a luxury. Tonight someone passes around a half-ripe persimmon. It's sour, bitter, perfect. You bite and your mouth wakes up. You feel alive for exactly 2 seconds before the bitterness reminds you what you are. You savor it anyway. Afterwards, you rinse the bowls with sand and wipe them with the sleeve of a tunic you no longer wash because water is too valuable and soap is a fair tale. You stack them beside the fire to dry. You tell the children a story. Not for joy. For distraction. Something about a wandering monk who found enlightenment in a cabbage. They laugh. You envy them. You kiss their heads. They taste like smoke and dust. The fire dies down. You save a spoonful of pottage for morning. Not because it will improve, but because the idea of breakfast is easier to digest than the certainty of its absence. You tuck in the youngest with the same blanket that covers the woodpile. You sit a little longer, watching the shadows on the wall. You whisper to the gods, to your ancestors, to the fish head still floating in your memory. You asked for less pain tomorrow. Not no pain. Just less. You are Jianmin. And dinner is not nourishment. It's practice. For enduring the next day. For pretending you still belong to the world that eats without fear. The fire is almost out, and that's when the stories begin, not tales of gods or emperors, but of things real enough to taste like soot and old regret. You're huddled near the hearth, which is not a hearth but a pit dug into the center of the floor, ringed with stones you stole from a roadwork site 2 years ago. Smoke rises not up a chimney because you don't have one, but into the room itself, curling into your lungs and turning your cough into punctuation. The children are half asleep, wrapped in whatever fabric hasn't been bartered or burned. The air smells of old turnip and ash. That's when he speaks, your uncle, your neighbor, a man too old to work and too stubborn to die. His voice is gravel wrapped in memory, each sentence built from a dozen smaller, unfinished ones. He tells stories not to entertain, but to remember. Out loud, because forgetting is a form of defeat and you've already lost so many things. He talks about the old rebellions. The yellow turbans, the red eyebrows, names that sound like painted faces on broken masks. He describes how the peasants rose up, not because they thought they could win, but because starvation made obedience feel ridiculous. He laughs, a dry wheeze. And we thought they'd listen if we shouted loud enough, he says. Someone else mutters, they did listen. Then they buried us louder. No one laughs. Not because it isn't funny, but because the truth usually isn't. You pass a flask of homemade sorghum wine. It's foul. It's warm. It's what's left. You sip. It burns. You let it. Someone talks about a man who tried to leave the village. Headed for China, said he'd find work in the city carving stone lions or painting silk fans for the palace. They found his body in a riverbank 3 weeks later, his hands missing, probably sold for parts. The moral is left unsaid. Don't leave. Not because it's wrong, but because you are already erased enough here. Elsewhere, your erasure becomes permanent. Someone else mentions a tax clerk who forgave a widow's debt. He vanished. The widow was fined for causing disruption. These stories are not entertainment. They are instruction manuals, warnings, folklore. For the dispossessed. You tell one, too. A story of your cousin who tried to join the monkhood to escape labor. The temple refused him. Impure caste, they said. He tried again in disguise. They shaved his head and found the scar from a base-born punishment mark. They beat him unconscious and sent him back with a sign hung around his neck that read, presumption. He never spoke again. Now he hums to trees. Your niece is still awake. She asks, why doesn't anyone ever win in these stories? Someone answers, because we're not in the kind of stories where winning is an option. She nods. She's 8. She understands more than she should and less than she will. The stories shift to things less dire. A ghost scene near the canal. A fox spirit blamed for a stomach illness. Superstition feels lighter than history. It hurts less. You had won, a dream you had of a chicken that laid silver eggs. It danced. It spoke poetry. Then it exploded. The room snorts. Laughter, real and sudden. Someone coughs too hard and spits into the fire. The moment passes. But it was real. Laughter is rare, like meat. You savor it. Someone pokes the fire. Sparks leap like drunken insects. The flames reflect in eyes that haven't closed in 2 days. You tell yourself you're only awake because you're watching the fire. That's a lie. You're awake because sleep means vulnerability. The last time you fell asleep too early, someone stole your sandals. The time before that, your daughter got a fever. The fire's warmth fades. The wine is gone. The story's slow. One by one, people lie down, their breath loud, their dreams quiet. You stay up a little longer. Not because you have more to say, but because silence still feels like a question. You whisper a final line to the shadows, a story you haven't told in years. No one hears. That's fine. You weren't speaking to them. You were speaking to yourself. To the smoke. To the gods. You are Jianmin. And your stories are not legends. They are the echoes of lives the empire forgot to count. There's a kind of silence that doesn't belong to the night. It sits wrong, like a missing tooth or a door that's supposed to creak and doesn't. That's the silence you wake to tonight, in the 3rd hour, when the coals have gone cold and your bones have just begun to forget the day's cruelty. It's the silence of a village not sleeping but holding its breath, waiting for the knock that doesn't come as a knock, but as fists, boots, orders barked like thunder with no lightning, because lightning at least announces itself. The guards are here. Not the village ones. The real ones. Black-clad, horse-sweating, badge-wearing enforcers of imperial will and landlord vendettas. They don't knock. They enter. Your door, your dignity, and your right to peace all collapse at once. You scramble up, already apologizing for things you haven't done, for thoughts you haven't voiced, for your brother's face, which was probably the mistake. They don't speak to you. One shines a lantern, blinding in the dark. Another kicks your water jar over like it owes him something. They don't look for weapons, you aren't allowed any. They look for bodies, for names, for people who forgot their place or remembered their dignity a little too loudly. Juliang, they say, not asking, not hesitating. That's your brother. Younger. Quiet. Didn't show up to work last week. Fevered. Couldn't stand. You told the foreman. He nodded like he understood. You should have known better. Ju stands behind you, barefoot, shirtless, eyes sunken from nights like this. He doesn't speak. He's never been good with words. He raises his hands. It doesn't matter. They drag him by the arms anyway. You try to say something, anything, he's sick, he's no threat, he hasn't done anything. But your words bounce off armor, off power, off the pre-written script of this performance where you are the crowd and your job is to weep quietly or be next. Your mother wails. That's a mistake. A guard raises his rod and slams it against the wall beside her head. She stops. You grab her hand. It's shaking like bamboo in monsoon. The men leave with Ju. No explanation. No charge. No writ. Just the authority of a seal and the confidence of men who know they'll never be held accountable. The last one out drops a notice on your floor. It's not for you. It's for the ledger. A record of compliance. You read it by firelight. Labor. Reassignment. Imperial Works Project. Transported under supervision. Property of the state. Your brother has become infrastructure. You don't cry. You can't. The kids are watching. They don't understand, but they know this isn't just a visit. They know that once someone is taken at night, they don't come back whole, if at all. The last man dragged off returned mute and missing 3 fingers. Said it was a building accident. Wouldn't say more. They say the imperial projects are noble. Roads, bridges, canals. Symbols of civilization. You've seen the ones who build them. Bones poking through skin. Eyes that don't blink right. You don't know where Ju's going. Probably north. Maybe west. It doesn't matter. He's gone. And now you have his share of the work. His share of the rice tax. His share of the silence. You sit until morning. Not because you want to. Because your knees don't work and the thought of sleep feels blasphemous. You replay it again and again. What he could have done. What you could have said. The answer is always nothing. You are Jianmin. You are not arrested. You are borrowed, then misplaced. You are taken, then overwritten. You are not people. You are placeholders. You do not disappear. You are removed. You burn the notice. Not in rebellion. In grief. In practicality. You need the firelight. The children need warmth. The hut needs light. You cannot afford paper. To remember what you'll never be allowed to forget. In the morning, you tell the others. They nod, like you nodded when it was their cousin, their son, their sister. The nod means we know. The nod means don't talk too much. The nod means your turn will come. You go to work. You pick up your brother's tools. They are still warm. You carry them like they are heavier than they are. You carry them like guilt. Because you are Jianmin. And your family doesn't vanish. It is vanished. Quietly. Efficiently. Legally. The lanterns appear like hallucinations, floating golds and reds, crafted with care you'll never afford, lit by people who do not sweat, who do not kneel to mud, who do not fear famine when the harvest falters. It's the Lantern Festival. 15th day of the first lunar month, and the Empire is alive with celebration. But not you. You don't celebrate. You observe. From a distance. From outside the city wall where the caste marked are herded like inconvenient footnotes. The light does not reach your side of the river. The music does. Barely. Like laughter behind a closed gate. Your children ask to go. You say no, gently, then firmly, then finally. The festival is not for you. You are Jianmin, and your presence in joy is a civic disruption. Entry is barred. Not officially, no law needed. Just guards with spears and the kind of eyes that look through you like bad air. You are not trusted with celebration. You might taint it. You might forget your less. Better you remain in your quarter, where the lanterns are made of straw and regret, and the fireworks are distant echoes over the hill, not bursts of fire but reminders of your quiet. You remember going once, as a child, before your family was marked. Your mother carried you on her hip. You saw the dragon dance, the acrobats, the silk puppets with painted smiles. Then someone asked your father's name, and the smile dropped. You were escorted out. Not with force. With civility. That's worse. The implication that your exclusion is rational, correct, just another act in the performance of order. Tonight, you watch from a hill. The sky is littered with lanterns, each one a prayer for fortune, love, children, peace. You wonder what yours would say. Survival? Absence of pain? A warm meal that doesn't taste like old rope? Your niece makes one anyway. Out of reeds and rice paper scraped from tax notices. It barely holds together. She draws a flower. It looks like a wound. You tell her it's beautiful. You're not lying. You light it with a stolen ember. It rises 6 feet, sputters, and crashes into a pig trough. She laughs. You do too. Quietly. Carefully. Joy is always conditional. Back near the city, nobles in crimson robes sip wine sweetened with honey and forget the empire burns at its edges. Officials toss coins to musicians who haven't bled this month. Scholars compose couplets praising harmony while their servants are whipped for overcooking dumplings. You watch it all. You understand your place in it. You don't resent the lanterns. You resent the distance. You resent the invitation that never comes and the silence that explains why. The city glows like a promise no one made to you. You tell the children stories, myths of the moon goddess, the rabbit-pounding herbs, the man who flew too far and was cursed to live in light. They listen, mouths open, eyes reflecting fire they didn't light. You skip the part where the man is punished for daring to reach. The lesson is obvious. The night deepens. Someone lets off a string of firecrackers. They pop like bones breaking. You flinch. So does the dog. So does your memory. You offer your children a treat, roasted roots dipped in salt water. It's all you could manage. They pretend it's sweet. You pretend you believe them. The river reflects the sky. Lanterns drift across the surface, soft and slow, like souls that were never claimed. You whisper a name, your brother's, your uncle's, your own. It floats for a moment, then sinks. You do not chase it. You walk home in silence, stepping over shadows and spilled dreams. The children sleep quickly. You do not. You sit by the fire, holding a shard of broken lantern. It's red, brittle, sharp. Like hope. You turn it in your fingers. You do not bleed. You do not dare. You are Jianmin. And tonight is a festival. But not for you. Never for you. You do not celebrate. You endure. You fall in love like someone catching fire in a library, quietly, dangerously, and in a place where everything is flammable and nothing is supposed to burn. She's a servant, technically a rung above you, which means your affection is illegal. Your desire inappropriate, and your future together a violation of the Tang Dynasty's meticulously maintained social taxonomy. She lives 3 huts down, wakes before you, works harder than you, and never complains, which is either a miracle or a survival tactic honed by losing more than you've dared to keep. Her name is spoken in your head more than out loud, not out of shyness but strategy. Saying it too often might give it away, and you already know what happens to Jianmin who overreach. The first time you speak to her, it's over a water jar. You offer to help lift it. She doesn't laugh at the irony. Your arms are shaking from carrying bricks all morning, but she doesn't refuse either. She says thank you like someone who hasn't heard it in a long time and doesn't trust it yet. You talk again the next day and the day after, until it becomes routine, like drawing breath or dodging punishment. It's not courtship. It's mutual recognition. 2 people who know the same pain, share the same silence, and steal the same glances when no one else is watching. You don't touch. Not because you don't want to, but because there are laws about these things. Actual, written laws. The Tang legal code prohibits marriage between the base caste and the good people, which includes servants of noble households. Your affection is a crime. If reported, she'd be flogged. You'd be branded. The magistrate would frown and issue a proclamation about maintaining order. The villagers would nod, not because they agree, but because heads are easier to keep. When they are bowed, you keep your distance. You speak in riddles. You trade favors. She saves you an old turnip once. You give her the better half of your rice. It's enough. Almost. One night, during the Mid-Autumn Festival, you sit together behind the woodpile while everyone else lights lanterns and pretends the moon looks down on them kindly. You don't have a lantern. You don't need one. Her eyes catch the firelight and you forget, for one idiotic second, that the world is real. You brush her hand. She doesn't pull away. She doesn't smile. She just looks at you like she's memorizing your face for the last time. And maybe she is. Because the next morning, she's gone. Transferred, sold, relocated. You're not told which. Her hut is already occupied by a new worker who doesn't speak and doesn't ask. You check the work site. The fields. The canal. You ask once, then twice. Then you stop. Asking is suspicion. Suspicion is danger. You return to routine, carrying bricks with a weight that doesn't show in the load but drags down every breath. You say nothing. You've been trained well. Love is not forbidden because it disrupts order. It's forbidden because it reminds people that dignity is possible in suffering. That the heart doesn't obey class, or law, or fear. That a base-born laborer can feel something other than hunger and hate. You still see her sometimes. Not really. Just a shadow in a doorway. A laugh that isn't hers but sounds close enough to make your chest ache. You speak to her in your sleep. You hope no one hears. You keep her name safe. You don't say it. Not even to yourself. But you remember. You remember her hands. Her silence. Her absence. And the way your life resumed as if nothing had happened. Because it didn't. Not officially. Not legally. Love between base and beta isn't recorded. It's erased. You are Jianmin. And love is not for you. It's a trespass. A theft. A contraband emotion smuggled between moments of exhaustion. And when it's gone, the world doesn't mourn. It simply resets. And pretends you never hoped at all. The gods in your world aren't distant celestial figures, they live in cracks in the wall, the breath of your rice, the rattle of your joints, the way your shadow sometimes lags a second behind you. You are Jianmin in Tang Dynasty China, and superstition isn't a distraction, it's infrastructure. It organizes your fear, regulates your guilt, and punishes you in ways the law hasn't gotten around to yet. You wake each morning with a silent nod to the stove god, who's soot-caked. Shrine is wedged between your fire pit and the family's only water jug. You don't believe in him, not exactly, but you believe in consequences, and once you forgot the incense and your cousin broke his leg hauling timber. The correlation was unclear. The message wasn't. You burn a scrap of bin husk in his honor. It smells like old debt and burnt hope. The local shrine has a god for everything: wind, ancestors, sore teeth. You've paid homage to each with a seriousness that borders on terror. Not because you're devout, but because the people around you are, and their belief is more dangerous than any actual divine wrath. If something goes wrong, someone must be blamed, and if you haven't cut out recently or your chicken sneezed near a sacred idol, that someone is you. A woman down the road once accused you of cursing her son when he developed a rash after touching your bowl. You tried to laugh. That was a mistake. The village elders decided the matter needed resolution. You were made to sleep outside for 3 nights, barefoot and exposed, to let the spirits judge your innocence. It rained the second night. You caught a cold that settled in your lungs like an unpaid tax. The boy got better. No one thanked you. You carry talismans now, not because they work, but because they show you understand the system. One's a knotted string soaked in vinegar. Another is a coin with a hole punched through the head of a dragon. They jingle when you walk. The sound is supposed to scare away spirits. It mostly just reminds everyone you've been accused before. You once saw a scholar laugh at a peasant who tied garlic to her roof to ward off demons. The peasant shrugged. The scholar died of dysentery a week later. No one said, "I told you so." They just tied more garlic. Your niece was born on a bad luck day, according to the almanac. You weren't told at first, just noticed how other mothers held their children tighter when she passed. Someone left a chicken foot on your doorstep. You buried it. You prayed over it. You burned it. It came back. Now you carry her everywhere, speak of her only in whispers, and never mention her name near the well. Just in case. There's a man in your village who claims to read fortunes from duck intestines. He was wrong 3 times in 1 week but is still considered reliable because the 4th time, he predicted a drought and the canal dried up 2 months later. You offered him a jar of pickled radish once for a reading. He told you your path was twisted and full of stones. You could have told him that for free. But you still bowed and thanked him. It's not about accuracy. It's about participation. You avoid certain trees. You whistle only at dusk. You never kill a spider in spring, and you never step over a body, even if it's sleeping, even if it's drunk, because that's how you invite a ghost into your life. Ghosts are the only things in your world with guaranteed freedom. They don't pay tax, and no one can draft them. You envy them. Just a little. You've seen people possess themselves. Not theatrically, quietly. A woman once stood outside the temple and screamed a poem into the wind for 3 days. No one stopped her. They assumed a spirit had borrowed her mouth. When she stopped, she dropped dead. The temple held a ritual. The villagers left rice at the doorstep. You still think about that poem. It made more sense than most orders from the magistrate. Superstition is how the powerless control the uncontrollable. It's not stupidity. It's structure. It's the scaffolding that holds up your sanity. When the gods are watching, at least someone is. Even if they hate you. Even if they forget you. Even if they never existed. You are Jianmin. And belief is not faith. It's insurance. Paid daily. With ash. And fear. And silence. You will die. That's not the tragedy. The tragedy is that when you do, no one will remember. Your name, already little more than a whisper in a ledger, will vanish like steam from boiled ditch water, and your body will return not to the earth but to a shallow, communal hole behind the latrine trench, dug with the same tools used to break the day's clay bricks. You will not be mourned. Not properly. There will be no incense lit, no monk to chant your passage into the next life, no silk banner declaring your virtues, no carved headstone quoting Confucius or Lazi in your defense. The rights that secure the soul's safe journey, those belong to the registered, the reputable, the rich. You are Jianmin, and you die outside the script. When you stop breathing, your family has 3 options, all bad. 1. Try to bribe a low-ranking temple novice to accept your body into a pit behind the monastery wall, reserved for beggars and disgraced scribes. 2. Bury you quickly, illegally, in a stretch of riverbank soil already claimed by other unmarked endings. Or 3. Leave you for the village guard to collect, in which case your corpse joins a wheelbarrow procession to the pauper's field, where bodies are stacked like kindling and covered in lime and quick apologies. Your niece will cry. Your son will not. He'll be too busy wondering how to feed the rest of them now that you're not here to drag half your weight in bricks. The neighbors will nod, solemn but unconcerned. Everyone's seen a death before breakfast. Some have seen 2. If someone tries to remember you, they'll remember what you owed, not who you were. He still had 3 dao left unpaid, someone might mutter. He once mouthed off to the foreman, says another. His foot always dragged a bit, offers a third, already forgetting your face. No one will mention the way you used to hum during repairs, or how you once found a peach stone and saved it for a child who'd never seen one. That's not how Jianmin are remembered. You're remembered as a cautionary tale or not at all. If the body's not buried fast enough, the heat and flies do their work. You become a hygiene issue. The magistrate sends a notice, all deaths must be reported, all remains disposed of, all complaints made through official channels. There is no channel for dignity. There is no form for grief. Your funeral is a pit and a prayer that you don't float back up during the next flood. Even in death, you are not done working. Your bones will fertilize some lord's barley. Your teeth will be found by pigs. Your cloth robe, your last possession, will be stripped and used to wipe pots. You don't get an afterlife. You get decomposition. You don't get veneration. You get decay. There are no joss sticks lit in your name. No ancestor tablets etched with calligraphy. No one burns paper money for you. You are not an ancestor. You are a footnote. A whisper. A nameless pile of dust behind someone else's rice field. You once dreamed of being buried beside your wife. She died during the famine 3 years ago. You placed her under the tree near the canal. The tree is gone now. Cut for timber. The canal rerouted. Her grave trampled by progress and forgotten by design. You stop visiting when you realize you're not sure where she is anymore. You light a candle for her anyway, sometimes. Not because you believe in spirits, but because you don't trust forgetting. When you die, no one will light one for you. Not because they won't want to, but because they'll be too busy surviving, and candles cost more than tears. You think about engraving your name on something. A rock. A wall. A bowl. But writing requires permission. And permanence is a form of defiance. So you let the idea go. You lie down each night with your back to the wind and your eyes on the smoke from the fire. You wonder what it would feel like to be buried warm. You wonder if worms taste different when they eat privilege. You wonder who will carry your body when it's time and how they'll feel when they drop it. You are Jianmin. And you will die as you lived, unrecorded, unremarked, and ultimately return to a world that was never designed to notice you. You used to believe in reincarnation. You don't anymore. Not because it isn't real, but because if it is, then someone somewhere made a catastrophic clerical error, and you've spent your entire life paying for it. You're Jianmin Tang Dynasty China, which means if karma has any logic at all, you must have been a warlord who spat in a monk's rice bowl in your last life. Now, you exist in a loop of suffering so meticulous it feels curated, like the gods outsourced your punishment to a particularly bitter bureaucrat. They say if you live virtuously, you'll be reborn higher. But what does virtue look like for a man who's never owned a full bowl of rice, let alone the time or security to develop a moral code beyond "don't die yet"? You wake before the sun, work until your blood tastes like rust, give away half your food, and kneel when told. You pray. You nod. You endure. And still, nothing changes. The priest says it's because your soul hasn't learned detachment. You'd love to detach from labor, from pain, from the smell of rot that follows you like a loyal dog. But instead you're here, same as yesterday, same as always. You once asked if animals can reincarnate as humans. The temple boy said yes. If they accrue enough merit. You laughed. Then stopped. Because in your next life, you want to be a horse. Not a nobleman. Not a poet. A horse. Horses are valued. Horses are brushed, fed, sheltered. When they break a leg, someone notices. You saw a horse die once and the merchant wept. You saw a man die in the canal and no one stopped eating. You want to come back as something that gets fed before it gets punished. You told this to your niece once. She asked what you think she'll be. You said, a bird. A fast one. One that never lands. She smiled. You didn't. The idea of escape is a joke you repeat until it feels like a prayer. The cycle of rebirth is supposed to offer hope. But hope is a luxury good. Hope is what people burn incense for in temples you're not allowed to enter. Hope is what scholars write poems about while you're dragging bricks under the same sun. That kills crops and cracks skin. You don't dream of heaven. You dream of neutrality. Of coming back as a tree. Not one that bears fruit, too many expectations. Just a quiet tree, beside a road, ignored but unbothered. Maybe people will piss on you. That's fine. At least you won't have to bow. At least you won't rise to the sky. They say enlightenment breaks the cycle. But you've seen monks reach enlightenment and still require donations. You've seen them eat better than you, sleep better than you, live longer than you. You don't resent them. But you don't trust a system where detachment is achieved in silk robes and recited through lotus breath, while your detachment is learned by burying your children with your bare hands. Your cousin believes in rebirth. She leaves offerings. Not big ones, half a yam, a coin, a smile. Her husband was taken during the last conscription. She says he'll come back stronger. You nod. You don't argue. Belief is the only thing keeping her upright. You envy her. Not for her faith, but for the way it makes her suffering seem like part of a story instead of a statistic. You once tried to reincarnate early. That's how the guards described it. They pulled you from the canal. Said you were drunk. You weren't. You were tired. The magistrate fined you for wasting state resources. You smiled. That was your enlightenment. You understood the joke. You didn't try again. You're afraid it might work. If you die, you'll come back. That's the curse. That's the cosmic joke. Not that you die, but that you return reborn. Remarked, recolored into the same caste, the same dirt, the same unforgiving empire. You wonder if the gods laugh. You wonder if they remember creating you. You wonder if you'll remember this life in the future. Probably not. That's mercy. Or maybe that's the final punishment. To be erased and still returned. You are Jianmin. And reincarnation isn't a path. It's a carousel. And you never got to choose your horse.